Episode 37, the 27th of February, 1999. I'm invariably lulled into a state of inactivity, or at least non-intervention, far too early in the season. There is a sense, once the high point of summer is over, that it's all downhill from here and that the garden may as well be allowed its head. But there are at least two things that need watching as the summer departs if the garden's going to continue to perform to its best into the autumn. The first of these is deadheading, or at least a regular tidying up of stuff that's gone right over and is spoiling the fresh stuff still coming on. It was interesting turning up at Great Dixter about 2 years ago, about now in their season, so at the end of summer, early autumn, and Fergus Garrett saying, "Oh, we've just been through and gotten rid of the browns." And it was the most succinct way I've ever heard of summing up this kind of editing that you do in the late summer into the early autumn, when it's just too early to just let it rip, and for the things which have passed to start bringing down that which is still yet to come. And just getting rid of the browns is a really beautiful way of saying it. So that's what I was doing here 20 years before that, but before I knew the term. The trend in perennial selection, both in Europe and the United States, is toward plants that extend their season with interesting seed heads, so intense and regular deadheading may one day be a thing of the past. I never minded it when gardening for others. In fact, there were few more pleasant summer tasks, but it ain't a leisure activity, and it ain't likely to happen very often in my own garden. What I usually do get around to doing, however, is the removal of the dead or dying leaves of earlier flowering things. Anthriscus sylvestris ravenswing and Papaver patty's plum, planted together in what I imagine to be an inspired, but is actually a really disappointing combination, are cut to the ground as soon as I think they'll tolerate it. The same goes for anything else that does its thing early in the season. I don't want anything looking past its best in high summer. Nor will I put up with any plant in midsummer that isn't looking like it's thriving. A general feeling of vitality and vigour is more important to me than any particular plant in the garden. I don't coddle anything, but sometimes slip into a temporary state of tolerance of some mediocre performer. I'll be bending over it, wondering why it isn't doing so well, feeling a little sorry, then suddenly something cracks and the plant is gone. I wish I could be as ruthless with those plants that are doing really well, but I happen to have lost interest in. If the present trend continues, I'll wind up with a garden full of steady, reliable performers, which bores me silly. But the other thing to watch is the continuing strong growth of many plants at this time of year. The nasturtiums are a good example. Their crazed romp is exactly what I want, but it can get out of hand like those playing about on top of the Nicotiana. I know it will all end in tears. They'll lasso and pull down the Nicotiana, but I can't bring myself to do much about it. What's more, by the time such climbers appear through the top of a neighbouring plant, they're often so difficult to extract that you convince yourself that you'll do more damage trying to remove them than by leaving them, which is exactly what they hope you'll think. The golden hop is likewise up to no good, running through, up and over everything, looking irresistible, irrepressible, and, I convince myself, irretrievable. Those big annuals keep on growing also, along with the dahlias, etc. And just when you're out of staking mode, one enormous plant will drop sideways, leaving a big hole. Even if you're lucky enough to salvage the plant with a big stake, it's likely to have adjusted its growth sideways so that it never quite looks as comfortable again. I think one of Christopher Lloyd's absolute superpowers was that almost childish love of plants, which was such that he knew when he'd lost it, and the moment he'd lost it, the plant was gone. He had no tolerance of things that were just performing for their own sake, that was just like, oh, well, it works hard for me. He wanted to love not only the overall effect of his garden, but every individual player within it. And it meant that he never just grew kind of tolerant of things that were just ticking along. And it's that kind of ruthlessness, I think, that is required to make a really fantastic, exciting and engaging garden.